Is your website or a lack of a website causing you to leave money and opportunity on the table? Or do you think your website is nothing more than an online resume or brochure? Then you definitely are. Hey there, I'm Betsy Jordyn. I'm a business mentor and a brand messaging and positioning strategist for purpose driven consultants and coaches, and I help them create high impact, high income businesses they love. You can learn more about my VIP programs on my website at www.betsyjordyn.com. Don't forget Jordan's with a Y. So, in this video, I want to take you step by step on how to get a website that serves you significantly better than any brochure or resume type of website. And I'm going to help you discover what it takes to build a credibility and connection building platform that's working 24/7, effortlessly attracting those leads, converting them into potential clients. So I get this whole like website design process might be new to you, a bit overwhelming. And I get that writing about what you do and using pictures of yourselves can be extremely vulnerable. But I promise you, once you get on the other side of these challenges and you have like an online platform that's a marketing tool that not only helps attract clients, but it's something that you're proud to direct people to, everything will change for you, I promise. But in the meantime, I know that it's a big project. So to help you out, please head on over to my website. It's at betsyjordyn.com/downloads. And I have a website project planner there that will show you step by step around how you take all the complexity of creating a website and put it into a project plan that you could follow. Because there are a lot of moving parts, and there's only so much I could tell you in a video. But specifically in this video, I want to really inspire you into the powerful role that your website plays and why it's super challenging to create, the steps to building your website right the first time. And then I want to give you the hidden value of your website development and how it will transform your long term results. So let's dive in. Why are websites so powerful? So why they exist. So they're it's different than a resume. So think about what a resume is. It's a summary of your credentials and there's an open position for that a company may have posted and you're trying to show like my resume matches that open position. That's kind of what job hunting looks like. Your website is a completely different venture because the work that you're trying to do likely will not have a job description. And in fact, the transformational work won't. So, what your website does is it creates this connection with your potential clients where they can go and get inspired by what you do and where they can go to find out about your business. So, there's a connection element that is there. So this is also your online store. Like, this is where people go and buy things from you. In terms of the next step for buying something on from your website standpoint is probably to jump on a call with you, but it's about that. The other thing about your website is it builds credibility. When you think about the kind of work that you're doing and the type of clients you want to attract, if you're a consultant or coach, likely you are trying to attract, high achieving professionals. You're looking to work with leaders. And so you want to build your credibility that you are somebody who delivers on your promises, as well as you're somebody who will make them look good. That when you're thinking about from an executive standpoint, is they're bringing you in, they're staking their reputation on you. They will be showing your website to a whole bunch of people before they bring you in, and so your website will give your clients a taste like, yes, this person's the real deal. They're legit. I can put my reputation on the line for them. If you have content on your website, it's even more valuable because you give clients a taste of the value that you offer. Credibility also comes from your social proof. Like, so that makes them feel like, oh, wow, like I could see that they've delivered results. But more importantly, it makes them feel like, oh, I didn't realize like this is what somebody can create. I want that too. And then the other thing about a website is it's a converting operation, so it's here as the hub of your marketing system. So even if you are trying to get clients purely from referrals, you're going to direct them to your website and your website tells them what to do next. So you want to set it up for sure, especially if you're using content to attract those clients. But what you do on your website guides them through the path to whatever that next step might be. For consultants and coaches, our primary next step is to book an intro call. So it converts them in terms of it converts the people who land on your website and it converts them into potential clients. The other thing about this website value is you think about how many touch points it takes for a client to know, like, and trust you before buying from you. So research would tell you it takes seven touch points that influences how they perceive you. which has a direct connection, not just on do I want to work with you, but how much they perceive that you're worth and how much they want to pay you. So even if you have a client who comes through a referral, so let's say you have a colleague who refers you to a potential client, that client will check out your website. That client will also check out your social media profile. Based on what they see and read, they will book a call with you. That's another touch point. Based on what they see and read, in that experience, they will have perceptions of your value. Like before they get on the call, you conduct the call, they're creating an impression. You create and present them an offer with pricing, and now you have multiple touch points. So a lot of people think like with a referral, it just goes from, oh, this person introduces me to them. Now we're on an intro call, bam, I'm credible. And not seeing all these other touch points that are building that credibility and that confidence. Or on organic search, that's even more because you are shaping thinking before they get on a call with you that you're like somewhat of a celebrity. Like I can't tell you how many times like I get on an intro call, they're like, "Oh, it's really you." I'm like, "Yeah, it is me." And it's like somehow because I have podcasts and videos, like I'm looking like an expert, and I probably am an expert because I've been in the consulting business for 30 years. Like, let's just own it. But they wouldn't know I'm an expert if I didn't have all of this content, that's expressing it. So from an organic search standpoint, the client goes online and they're looking for a solution. They're looking for answers. What are the steps to org design? Then they find your content on their website. It's like, ah, yes, they have the answer. And they're like, oh my gosh, they have more. I'm going to sign up for their lead magnet and I'm going to follow you on social media. Now they're getting like regular value from you. And then when they're ready to act, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to call this person who I've been developing this virtual relationship with. You conduct that intro call, you create and present your offer, and now all of a sudden you are going to be with a client who's ready to invest in you. They're looking at you as the expert that they're looking for. So the truth is, and this is like a big time branding truth that your website plays a big role in, is that you're going to be positioned in the market and by your ideal clients, whether you invest in your website, anything with your branding or not. The question isn't about are you getting positioned? The question is really, are you being positioned in the way you want? And your website plays a key role in taking charge of that positioning. So that's why they're so important and powerful. Well, let's get into why they are so challenging. And they are so challenging because there's so many freaking moving pieces and parts. Oh my gosh, the learning curve. There's tech, there's graphic design, there's copywriting, like all of these skills that most consultants and coaches, even those who might have some background, in marketing, may not have experience in all of them. It's like building a house, like there's all these different components. Like building your website, there's so many different components. When you're the brand, there's all that vulnerability that's involved. Like you got to get pictures of yourself, and hopefully they're going to look good, but there's that fear that they're not, you're going to put yourself out there. You can put a big bold promise about the value that you're going to create. Yikes, that's totally vulnerable. So you got the learning curve, the overwhelm in areas that is not necessarily in our wheelhouse. There's a vulnerability. And the biggest challenge, I'll tell you, when it comes to designing a website is you just start on it too soon. Way, way, way too many of my clients will tell me like, "Oh, I wish I would have talked to you before I invested XYZ in my website because it was just too soon." They didn't have their brand positioning solid. They didn't know what they were selling. They didn't know what their marketing path was, and they didn't build their site correctly, or they just got stalled out. That's a huge reason why it's so challenging is you have to do it at the right time in the process. So, how do you build the website right the first time? Is you just have to do the foundational work, period. You really need to nail your positioning, which means how you are forging a connection in the market between your ideal client and the problem you solve and you and what makes you unique. That's your positioning. Then you need to work on your messaging, which are the words you use to describe the value that you do. It's the words you use in your networking event. It's the words you use to describe, like, this is what I do. It's my title. It's the words. And then you need to create really cool offers. You need to frame up what you do, not in hourly rates or retainers, in terms of like some people have retainers where, I'll get a certain amount of money, but then I'll like just charge time against it. That's not what we're talking about here. It's really turning what you do into packages. It's also getting really clear on how you're going to sell what you do. And I don't believe in sales when it comes to consulting or coaching. It's really about how you are setting up the partnership and getting clear on how are you going to get your clients. So you need to get this foundational stuff situated before you start working on your website project because your website project and your website itself needs to support the whole kit and caboodle. And then you need to strategize like what is the role your website is going to play in your overall marketing system. So you need to be thinking about like what are you going to do to drive brand awareness and traffic to your website? And then what do you want your clients to experience once they land on your website? And then what do you want them to do after? Ideally, schedule a free consult, but what else are you going to have them do? Sign up for a lead magnet? Are you going to have them buy something? those those strategies get translated into your sitemap. So you might have heard the word sitemap. A sitemap is simply how many pages you have and sort of like what's the architecture. So if you might just say, I want just a single homepage website type of thing, a single page, then your structure might be that. Or maybe I want to have a homepage with a blog and that's it. Like that's your entire website based on how it fits your marketing system. Maybe you want to go more extensive. You need a homepage and about page. Like the homepage is really the executive summary of your business. Your about page is all about creating that personal connection, sharing your empathy and your authority. What's your story? What's your why? Your about page is all about that. So if you want to be more extensive and share a little bit more about your background, your about page is for that. And then you might have multiple services page or maybe just one service page. So this is where you showcase the unique value and the features and benefits of what you do. So you might have one of those, like just one overall. Maybe you want to have an overall and then a page for each one of your services. Maybe you're going to be a speaker, so you need a page for that, or maybe you have a book to sell. So that's going to be another page. So you need to get that architecture situated. And then your blog is really important because your blog is where you're going to grab SEO. So you might have some web developers who will tell you, like, okay, we're going to embed a bunch of SEO into the back end of your website and we're going to try to drive organic traffic just from your website. And that works if you have like more of a local type of business. But if you're trying to do something global, it's really hard to drive any SEO without content. And that comes through your blog. So you need to be able to set up your blog in such a way that you can use that. But even if you don't have it all set up for SEO, the blog is really important because it allows you to establish that credibility, build that know, like, and trust factor. So having content on your website that people can start to consume, it makes them think, oh gosh, this person is the real deal. They totally get me, and I'm creating such a powerful, positive view of them, and they are just creating so much value for me. And then your contact page. This is a page where it's an easy way for people to connect with you. Connect with you maybe on social media, your email. You could have a form on that page. I just feel like over time, like forms don't work as much for me as a place just to book time on your calendar. Like online calendars are bigger. And then you need to think about like other pages you might want to have, like your opt-in page for a lead magnet, a thank you page that goes along with it. As I mentioned, a speaker page. Maybe you want to have a page of like free resources or other type of resources. Maybe you want to have a success stories testimonial page. So that is your sitemap. You need to figure out like what's your strategy. And then you need to think for each one of those pages, like what's the wireframe? So the thing about a wireframe is like this is how the page is designed because you don't design a website like in just one big block of text or one big design. It's if you could look at websites, they're all in these blocks. That's the wireframe. So you're breaking everything up into these bits of copy surrounded by image. And together, these blocks form the wireframes or blueprint of your website. So you need to get all of that situated before you even touch anything else. Before you even touch any sort of copywriting, is you want to have that clarity. Some of these steps might kind of go in a little bit of a roundabout. Is like you may not be able to figure this out on your own. So step 3 is if you might decide, or maybe this becomes step 1, somewhere in here, is you need to decide if you're going to DIY your website or hire experts. So DIY. So this is the problem a lot of people have when they are first starting their business or they're repositioning is they don't feel like I don't have money to invest in this, so I'm just going to DIY it. I have to tell you that DIY in many, many, many ways takes a lot longer and will cost you longer over the long term. But DIY could work is if you are a consultant or coach who has a flair for visual branding, website design, and copywriting. So that's for you. So one of the clients I worked with on their brand strategy and their approach to landing clients, we worked on their strategic plan for their website, but they themselves were amazing website designers. Like that was what they did. I obviously didn't need to help them with that. So you could just have somebody help you with a strategy. And maybe if you do have a flair, there's different pieces and parts. But if you think about the pro of DIY, it does have a lower cost up front, and that you can have full control over the design however you want to make it. And if you got the skills, you can launch kind of quickly. and it's flexible to learn and adapt along the way. The big time cons, big time cons is the steep learning curve and how time consuming it is to do it on your own if you don't necessarily know how to do it. I cannot tell you how many of my clients before we start to work together, they'll tell me like, "Oh yeah, I did a website in a weekend, but now it's been sitting here doing nothing because I hate it." Which goes to that next con is it may lack polish or look homemade, which in some ways, it turns away the potential clients or limits your fees, and in other ways, it makes you wanna turn away potential clients or limit fees because you don't wanna direct anybody to it. And it's easy to overlook the importance of copy, SEO, and other things that you don't know what you don't know. Like, if you're working in something that's completely out of your wheelhouse and is new, and you're just trying to, like, learn it from, different sources, that sometimes they won't tell you what you don't know, and that's another challenge here, and it may just take way, way, way longer. So that's the DIY. So for you to just think about like, is that for you? Or if you want to hire professionals, like this is great for consultants and coaches who know they're experts in helping people, but just not necessarily visual branding, website design, and copywriting. And they don't really want to master those skills over time, which you don't have to. Like, this is why, in some ways, when I create my VIP brand programs, is that I want to take things off of your plate on things that you don't have to master over the long term, and then I really force you to learn the skills that you will need to learn over the long term, like how you write proposals, how you write content. Like, those are the things you will need because that's how you operate your business. But you don't have to become an expert in visual branding. I mean, I guess you could like go to AI and try to create visual branding, but everybody could tell it's generic, it's not custom, but it may not be that important for you. So you get to make these decisions for yourself. The pro of hiring somebody to help you who's an expert is you do get your website done faster at a higher quality level without the spin and stress of doing it on your own. You definitely get stronger positioning and credibility, which leads to higher conversions and fees. You create a platform for growth and scale. The con is it's a higher investment up front, and it's an investment. It will deliver a return, but you have to like really trust yourself. Like, yeah, I'm going to put my money into this website and I'm going to do something with it. It requires finding the right partners and collaborators who can understand like your vision, what you want to convey. So, if you want to hire out, let me just give you a quick rundown of the type of people you're going to need to work with. You're going to need a graphic designer to express your brand visually, your logo, your color palette, your fonts. You're definitely going to need a photographer. The right photographer can make or break your website. So, you want to have a photographer who could put you in a pose. So, if you know that you have a good photographer, is when you're feeling really awkward with the way you're posing. Like, I'm trying to pose here for you to show you how awkward I feel when my photographer does that. And a really great photographer not just someone who could see you and pose you, but can draw out mirror for you the person that you're becoming in this next phase. So photographer is super important. You need a web designer and a developer, and you need somebody who may be able to help you with your copywriting to make sure that it sounds it just clear and compelling for the clients that you want to help. And you wanna be able to make sure that you have the partner with you, somebody who understands, like, how I'm going to bring this whole thing to life and have somebody overseeing the whole kit and caboodle. So, copy is really important. I'm gonna go back to copy, is that, like, design is important. It's hard for me to say. People always ask all the time, like, which is more important, copy or design? And I'm sort of a perfectionist about design, that I really want high quality. But also, I know copy as the words that you use for your business, like, that's what tells people what to do. It's your words that will get people to your website. So, copy is probably more important. But I think design is just as important because nobody's going to read your copy if the design is unattractive. And a lot of times if somebody gets on a website, like how many times you've gone to a website and you can't even tell what the copy is. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like it's so like the design is so awful, it's so distracting, like I can't even stay on here. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into a copy. And the other thing about copy is most of us consultants and coaches are just not good at it because like how to create great copy is the opposite of everything that we learned in corporate. So copy is another thing that you definitely want to be thinking about. So now you have decided, like, here's my strategy, here's where my website fits in, here's my wireframes, here's my sitemap, here's my team. Then you're gonna have to collect or create the assets that you're gonna need. So you're gonna need to get photos, of course, as I mentioned. You're gonna need to get maybe some personal photos too. Your visual branding, your copy, you gotta get all of that stuff together if you're using content. Oh, don't forget, you need benefit driven testimonials and their photos, all the tech stuff, the legal. You need to get all of that stuff like kind of written so that you can move into the next step, which is either you or the person that you hired is going to pair your words and images to create an amazing and engaging user experience. So you want to have somebody who's going to make it look great, but also move your ideal clients, like the visitors, along in the process. So once you have the website done, and now it's time for launch. I recommend a soft launch, then a hard launch. Soft launch is you let a couple of your friends and colleagues know, like, hey, it's kind of up. And then you can see how they feel about it, get feedback, and then you could do the hard launch. And then the last step is test and adjust. So, what I would recommend is this whole idea of what is success, and our success in what we do and everything to grow our business is never a straight shot. Like our forward movement is more like an ice skater, where you're kind of moving side to side. You put something out in the market, see how they respond, and adjust. So, to me, there's an adjustment that you have. Like, you don't have to do a wholesale rebrand every time it's like, oh, I put something out, nobody likes it. But you can tweak a word here and there to see if that converts better. But make sure that you get the metrics installed in your website and you use it before you start messing around and making changes. So, what's the real value of doing this? And it's basically this: when you transform how you see yourself, you're going to be able to show up differently. You're going to be able to show up in how you market yourself, how you land clients, and how you engage with them in a very different way. You will see yourself less as a transactional provider for hire. You'll see yourself as a transformational strategic partner. You are creating the opportunity to invite your clients into something really big and transformational for themselves and yourself as their key partner, and your website allows you to position yourself in that much more strategic, high impact way. So where might you get stuck? There's so many places you might get stuck. As I mentioned before, starting too soon is one of the big areas. Another one is just it's really hard to get the spotlight off of you and onto your clients on learning your corporate speak and writing engaging copy that resonates with your clients, framing up your services, and so much more. There are a lot of moving pieces and parts, and I want to make sure that you feel really comfortable with what you are creating, but I also want you to feel comfortable with your decision. And this might be one of those things that you might think it's smarter to just DIY it and see what happens, but you definitely will be leaving money and opportunity on the table. So if you want some help, I am here to help you. You can head on over to my website at www.betsyjordyn.com. You can learn more about my services. Better yet, request a discovery meeting with me. You'll find a big pink button at the top, and you can schedule some time. So that's it for this video. If you're watching it on YouTube and something is clicking with you, if you have additional website questions, definitely let me know. When you're on my website, if you're watching this on my blog, head on over to my download section. There's a free downloads, and you can get my website project planner, and that will definitely help you get a lot more detail than what I could provide for you in this particular video. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up to join my inner circle. I'll be sending you my latest videos, my podcasts, and more. So love to have you as part of my inner circle. So until next time, thanks so much for watching.